Hi there, and welcome to this lesson. And this lesson we'll be learning about basic arithmetic, okay? And under basic arithmetic, we'll be learning fractions, all right? And as the lesson progresses, if you have any issues at all with any of the concepts, anything comes off as unclear, please feel free to get in touch. You can do so via the course dashboard, and we would be happy to help. And at this point, I remind you to set the video to play in 1080p HD. You can do so via the settings icon on the bottom right. Okay, I think we can jump right into the lesson. So, fractions. Let's talk about fractions now. What are fractions? Okay, a fraction is a part of a whole. Okay, so for example, let's say you have a pizza and I split this pizza into six equal parts. Then I pick one out of the six, so that's a part of a whole. You have a fraction, so you have one part out of six, and that's it. That's a fraction. Very simple, very straightforward. Now, this is how we express fractions. We have 1/6. That's a fraction, and this top part, the top part of the fraction, i.e. the 1 in this case, is called the numerator, okay? And then the bottom part is called the denominator. Very simple, very straightforward. Let's move on. Now here are some common fractions, okay? We have 1/2, that's 1 out of 2. We have 1/3, we have 2/3, we have 3/4. These are some common fractions. And we can perform different operations on fractions, and there are several things about fractions that we need to understand. Okay, and we'll be covering all of these in this lesson. So first we'll learn to compare fractions. All right, for example, here's something to consider. We have 1/2, 1/3, 2/3, 3/4. Let's use 2/3 and 3/4. Now if I give you a pizza, or let's say I have two equal pizzas, right? And I split the first pizza into three equal parts, and I ask you to take two slices out of the three, and then I split the second one into four equal parts, and I ask you to take three out of the four. Which would you choose? I.e., which would actually give you a bigger share? Something to think about. Okay, so we would learn to compare fractions, i.e., in this case 2/3 and 3/4, which is a bigger fraction. So we learn to compare fractions, and then we learn about improper fractions, okay, and we learn about mixed fractions. We learn to add fractions, we learn to subtract fractions, we learn to multiply fractions, we learn to divide fractions, and finally we learn the order of operations. Okay, so let's start off. We have example 1. And example 1 says arrange the following fractions in ascending order of magnitude. Okay, and basically we're going to be comparing fractions here. We want to know which is the bigger fractions here, which are the bigger fractions here. So in ascending order of magnitude, we're going to arrange this from the smallest fraction up until the biggest one. And step 1 now, when you're comparing fractions, or when you're working with fractions and it has to do with magnitude, okay, when you're comparing fractions, or where you're adding fractions, or when you're subtracting fractions, something very important you have to do, you need to ensure that the fractions have a common denominator. Okay, for example, I can't tell which is bigger between 1/2 and 2/3 because at the moment they do not have a common denominator. I could tell you which is bigger if I was given 1/6 and 5/6. I could tell you that 5/6 is straight bigger, okay, because they have a common denominator. Okay, once they have a common denominator, it's very easy to compare their denominators. So the first thing you need to do when you're comparing fractions is you need to find a common denominator, and usually to do that we find the LCM of the denominators. Okay, and if you have any issues finding LCM, please get in touch and I'll be happy to explain to you how to go about finding an LCM. But usually you just multiply all true, you multiply all the denominators, and very often you end up at the LCM. Okay, so step one, common denominator. The common denominator here is 24. Okay, now it's a number that can be divided by all four denominators. 24 can be divided by 2, you'd have 12. 24 can be divided by 3, you'd have 8. 24 can be divided by 4, you'd have 6. And 24 can be divided by 8, you'd have 3. Okay, so you find a common denominator. And then the next thing you want to do, step 2, is you want to write each fraction. Basically, we can scale fractions up and down, and at this point you want to write each fraction. You want to write each fraction with the common denominator. Okay, for example, you have 1 over 2. I want to write 1 over 2 as another fraction with a denominator 24. What I'll do is I'll multiply through by 12. So I multiply 1 by 12, I have 12, and I multiply 2 by 12, I'd have 24. Okay, let's do it for the second one. I think you understand when I did it for the second one. So let's do 2 over 3. Now we want to write 2 over 3 with a denominator 24. Okay, and I tell you what you do in this case is you multiply with 8. Okay, because if you multiply the denominator 3 with 8, you'd get 24, and you do the exact same thing to the numerator. You multiply by 8 as well, and you'd have 16 over 24. Okay, let's do it for 3 over 4. Now we have 3 over 4 and want to express this as a fraction with a denominator 24, and I tell you in this case you multiply with 6. Okay, because when you multiply 4 by 6, you'd have 24, and you do the exact same thing to the numerator. You also multiply the numerator by 6, and you have 18 over 24. Okay, and then finally we have 5 over 8, and basically you want to express this with denominator 24. You, in this case, you'll be multiplying by 3 because 8 times 3 is 24, and you do the exact same thing to the numerator. You have 5 times 3 as 15 over 24. And that is pretty much it. Okay, and basically you can see we have 12, 16, 18, and 15, and at this point we can go ahead and compare the fractions, and we'll see that the smallest one here is 12 over 24, then 15 over 24, then 16 over 24, and 18 over 24, i.e. we have 1 over 2, then 5 over 8, then 2 over 3, and finally 3 over 4. So that's pretty much the idea. That's how to go about comparing fractions. But then there's actually a more conventional method of doing this. Okay, this is exactly what's going on, but there's a simpler way to get this done. It's a lot easier to understand. Okay, so let's do it. It's the same step 2. Okay, and we want to express all fractions with a common denominator. So we have all the fractions written out. Okay, and then we draw a line right beneath them, and then we bring in the common denominator. Basically we're expressing this as one big fraction. Okay, so we have one big fraction over 24. Okay, and here's what you do. For 1 over 2, you say 24, the common denominator, divided by 2, okay, multiplied by 1. Okay, so you have 24 divided by the denominator 2 multiplied by the numerator 1, and what you have is 24 divided by 2 is 12, multiplied by 1 is 12. Okay, let's do it similarly for 2 over 3. We have 24 divided by 3, that's 8. I'm going to multiply that by 2, the numerator. So we have 24 divided by 3, 8, times 2, we have 16. Okay, and then for 3 over 4, we have 24 divided by 4, that's 6, multiplied by 3, we have 18. And then for 5 over 8, we have 24 divided by 8, that's 3, multiplied by 5, we have 15. So now we have the same fractions that we got earlier, but we've just basically gone about it in I think it's fairly easier. Okay, in a more easier, using a more easier approach. So now we have 12, 16, 18, 15, and we can finally go ahead, compare all fractions, and the smallest will be 1 over 2. Okay, and then we have 15, so 5 over 8, and then we have 16, so 2 over 3, and finally we have 18, that's 3 over 4. And that is how you compare fractions by magnitude. Okay, arranged in ascending order of magnitude. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now example 2. Okay, and in this case, example 2 says evaluate 2 over 3 plus 3 over 4. And now basically what we have here is we've been asked to add two fractions. Okay, add 2 over 3 and 3 over 4. And going about that is actually quite straightforward. We'll jump right into it. So step one, the first thing you need to do, like I mentioned earlier, anytime you're working with fraction that has anything to do with magnitude, the first thing you want to do is you want to find the common denominator. They need to be expressed using a common denominator, and in this case a common denominator is 12. Okay, we basically just multiply 3 and 4 to get 12, or found the LCM of 3 and 4. Okay, and the next thing we want to do, step 2, we'll write out our fractions. So we have 2 over 3 plus 3 over 4. We'll draw that line, that big fraction line, and we'll write down our common denominator right beneath there. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to have 12 divided by 3, which is 4, multiplied by 2 will give you 8. Okay, we want to add that to bring down our plus sign, and basically we have 12 divided by 4 will give us 3, multiplied by 3, and that's 9. Okay, so step 3, so we have 8 plus 9 over 24. Okay, and basically we just add these up, so we have 8 plus 9, and that will give us 17 over over 12, not 24. Okay, so we have 17 over 12, and now I'm going to introduce the concept of improper fractions here, because we have a very strange looking fraction at the moment. We have 17 over 12, and remember, a fraction is a part of a whole. Okay, and basically we have a pizza and it's been cut into 12 slices. We actually have 17 slices out of 12, which is actually quite weird. We can't have 17 out of 12, and what we call this, we come across this a few times, and what we call this is an improper fraction. Okay, it's a strange fraction. It actually doesn't make any sense, but then we obviously don't express fractions in this form, but then we can actually make some sense of it. Okay, and we can convert this improper fraction to a mixed fraction. Okay, so if you have 17 slices out of 12, it's actually telling you you have a full pizza with 12 slices, and then you have another pizza with 5 slices out of 12. Okay, and basically here's how you go about it. You have 17 divided by 12. You can have one remainder 5. That's what that will give you, and you write that out as one whole number, 5 over 12. Okay, and this we call a mixed fraction. All right, okay, let's move on. So that is how you add fractions. Very simple. Example 3. Now example 3 says evaluate 3 1 over 2 minus 3 over 4. Okay, and just as easy. Okay, not too different from adding fractions. In this case we've been asked to subtract. Okay, and the first thing we need to do here, okay, is we need to convert. Anytime you actually work in fractions, you'd find you struggle to work with mixed fractions. You can actually work with them sometimes, but very often is best to convert them to improper fractions first, and then do all the math operations on them, then convert them back to mixed fractions. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to convert this mixed fraction to an improper fraction, and to do that we have 3 1 over 2, We multiply the denominator 2 by 3. Okay, so that's 2 times 3, it gives us 6, and we add it to the numerator 1, it gives us 7. Okay, so 2 times 3 plus 1, that's how it works. 2 times 3 plus 1, and you have 7 over 2. Okay, and then basically bring in minus 3 over 4. Now the next thing we want to do, obviously, is to find a common denominator. And the common denominator in this case is 4. It's a number that it's the smallest number that can be divided by 2 and 4. Okay, so we have a common denominator, and that's pretty much what LCM stands for, if I did not mention that earlier. LCM is lowest common multiple, is the smallest number that can be divided by the numbers in question. So the number in question, i.e. the denominators 2 and 4 in this case. So let's move on. Step 3, the next thing we want to do is we'll write down our fractions, we'll draw our line, we introduce our common denominator. Basically we go 4 divided by 2 multiplied by 7. 4 divided by 2 is 2, multiplied by 7 we have 14, and then we have 14 minus 4 divided by 4 is 1, multiplied by 3 we have 3, so 14 minus 3, and what we end up with is we bring in 14 minus 3 over 4, and then we have, when you work that out, you have 14 minus 3, and that gives you 11 over 4. And this is obviously an improper fraction, and we need to express this as a mixed fraction. So we have 11 divided by 4. What you'd have there is you'd have 2, remainder 3, so you write this out as 3 over 4. Okay, and that is how you subtract fractions. Alright, so at this point we've learned to compare fractions. We've learned, I think we're halfway through the lesson now. We've learned to compare fractions, we've learned to add fractions, we've learned to subtract fractions. The next thing we want to learn is how to multiply fractions. And multiplying fractions is actually really easy, very straightforward. Let's get right into it. Okay, so example 4. And example 4 says evaluate 4 over 7 multiplied by 3 over 8 multiplied by 7 over 9. Okay, let's jump right into it. So when you multiply a fraction, it's actually fairly easy. Basically, I have all the fractions here. 4 over 7 multiplied by 3 over 8 multiplied by 7 over 9. And I'd basically just go 4 times 3 times 7. Okay, 4 times 3 is 12, times 7 is I think we have 84. Okay, and I'd multiply the numerators out, I get my answer. Multiply the denominators out, so we have 7 times 8, that's 72, times 9, that should be 18, I think, something. Let's find out. So we have 84 divided by 648, and that's it. That's how you multiply fraction. There really isn't much to it. You just multiply the numerators. Okay, there's no common denominator, what have you here. You just multiply the numerators and you have multiplied the denominators and you get an answer. But something about this answer is you can't leave this answer like this. You have to express this answer in its simplest form. Okay, so basically you're going to keep dividing the numerator and the denominator by equal numbers. For example, you start with 2 and you have 2 in 84, that will give you 42, and you'd have 2 in 648, that will give you 334, and you'd continue doing that until you get to a point where you can't divide anymore, and you end up with an answer 1 over 6. Okay, now this process can be actually quite strenuous, and we don't want to be doing that. Okay, and we don't even want to be working sums like this where we end up with 84 and 648. Now this is the idea, but here's a better approach. Here's a better way to go about it. So it's the same step 1. Okay, we want to multiply 4 over 7, 3 over 8, and 7 over 9. All right, now here's something you do. We can actually start breaking these fractions down before we multiply them. Okay, we can actually start crossing, because we're working all the numerators and all the denominators now. We can actually start crossing out before multiplying them. And let me just do it so you understand what I'm talking about. So I can actually go 4 here. 4, I'm going to divide that numerator by 4, and it gives me 1. And I divide this denominator by 4, and it gives me 2. Okay, so it's the same simplification that we did at the end, where we had 84 and 648, and we're dividing the numerator and the denominator by equal numbers to get it down to its simplest form. But then we're basically just going to do this before we multiply, because it actually makes the multiplication a lot simpler. Okay, and then I can also go 3 here, 1, and then 3 here, 3. Okay, and then finally I'd go 7 here, 1, 7 here, 1. All right, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to write out these fractions. Okay, so from 4 over 7, I'm left with 1 over 1. Okay, multiplying. From 3 over 8, I'm left with 1 over 2. Okay, and then from 7 over 9, I'm left with 1 over 3. All right, and then I can basically just go about multiplying this. It's far simpler now. I go 1 times 1 times 1, that's 1, and 1 times 2 times 3 is 6, and I have an answer 1 over 6. Simple. And that is how you multiply fractions. Okay, let's move on to the next example. In example 5, we're going to learn how to divide fractions. Okay, and it says evaluate 4 over 7 divided by 2 over 3. There really isn't much to dividing fractions. Okay, it's dividing fractions is actually very similar to multiplying fractions. There's just one small bit, just one small thing we have to do, and that's just step 1. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. We have step 1. We've been told to divide 4 over 7 divided by 2 over 3. Now watch closely. So we have 4 over 7. Okay, now I'm going to change this division sign to a multiplication sign. Okay, are you following? Wonderful. So 4 over 7 multiplied by, and the minute I change that division sign to multiplication sign, I'm going to flip the fraction following the sign. Okay, so the fraction we're dividing by. All right, so instead of 2 over 3, it becomes 3 over 2. Okay, and from this point on, I believe you know exactly what to do. Okay, 4 over 7 multiplied by 3 over 2, and we cancel out. I think we can cancel out 4 and 2 there. So we have 2 here, 2, 2 here, 1. Okay, and then the next thing we have is we have 2 over 7 multiplying 3 over 1. Okay, and then we have our answer as 6 over 7, and that is how you divide fractions. Fairly easy, fairly straightforward. Okay, let's move on to the next section. Okay, and finally we would be learning the order of operations. Okay, this is the final bit of this lesson. So order of operations. Now, what's the order of operations about? What exactly are we talking about? Okay, the order of operations is a collection of rules that govern the order in which arithmetic operations are performed in order to evaluate a given mathematical expression. Okay, and very simply put, basically I have this expression here. So I've been told to find 2 plus 5 multiplied by 3. Okay, and basically I've gone 2 plus 5, that's 7, and then I multiply that by 3. 7 times 3 is giving me an answer 21. Okay, now here's something interesting. The same expression, 2 plus 5 multiplied by 3, but in this time I decide to multiply 5 times 3. Okay, so I have 5 times 3, that's 15, and then I added this to 2, and I go and answer 17. Now which basically we have the same expression and we have two different answers. And the two different answers basically just was as a result of the order in which we performed the operations. Did we multiply first before adding, or did we add before multiplying? Okay, because this is actually very important because it obviously gives you two different answers, and we want to know which of these answers is actually correct, because they're obviously not both correct. One is wrong and one is right. Okay, so and that's the idea of the order of operations. Order of operations will tell you which operation you need to perform. Do you multiply first before adding? Do you subtract before dividing? Which operation do you need to perform? What's the order of mathematical operations in mathematics? Okay, and to do this we use one very simple thing you need to remember, and it's BODMAS. Okay, BODMAS, BODMAS. So what is BODMAS? Now BODMAS stands for brackets, order, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Okay, and it basically just tells you the order in which you perform mathematical operations. Now when you're given any mathematical operation, the first thing you need to do is you consider the brackets. Okay, whatever is in the brackets, that's the first thing you do. Anything that's in the brackets, you always solve that first, and after that you deal with order. Okay, and order basically it's about your squares and square roots. Okay, for example, if I have 2 squared multiplied by 4, I wouldn't multiply 2 by 4 before squaring it. I would square it first before multiplying. Okay, so we have order, and then we have division. Okay, division and multiplication. To be fair, these are actually interchangeable. You can either multiply or divide. It doesn't really matter which one comes first, but in this case we just consider division. We often just do division first. Okay, for example, if I say 2 times 4 divided by 2, if you multiply 2 by 4, you will get 8 divided by 2 will give you 4. Or if you divide 4 by 2 first, you'd have 2 multiplied by 2 will still give you 4. So when it comes to multiplication and division, the order really doesn't matter. And then you have addition and subtraction, and addition and subtraction works in pretty much the same way. They're also interchangeable, but for the purpose of this BODMAS, just remember it's brackets, then order, then division, then multiplication, addition, and finally subtraction. Okay, so now basically with what we've learned, let's look back at what we had before. We have 2 plus 5 multiplied by 3 to give us 21, and we have 2 plus 5 multiplied by 3 to give us 17. Based on the BODMAS principle, which answer is correct? Okay, now BODMAS tells us that we need to multiply before we add. Okay, which will tell us that the first thing we need to do is we need to do 5 times 3, which will give us 15 before adding that to 2. So it will tell us that in this case the first one is wrong and our correct answer is 17. Okay, so something you need to be very careful about. It's a very important bit. Okay, so and let's solve an example on the order of operations, and we've been told to simplify this. It looks kind of weird, but it's actually very simple. So we have 2 over 3 divided by, and we have these in brackets, and we have 4 1 over 2 off. Okay, off in this case, 1 1 over 3 and minus 2. Okay, now I tell you something. Basically, when you see off in fraction, it simply means multiplication. Okay, so step 1. Okay, and basically step 1, we're just gonna change off to multiplication. Okay, so we have 2 1 over 3 divided by 9 over 2 multiplied by 4 over 3, and we also convert 4 1 over 2 and 1 over 3 to improper fractions from mixed fractions. Okay, and then we have minus 2. That's pretty much step 1. And then step 2, basically the first thing we need to do is we need to solve what's in the bracket. Okay, in the inner bracket. So we have 9 over 2 multiplied by 4 over 3, and when you solve that out is you're going to have 6. Okay, so when you solve that inner bracket out, you have 6. 9 over 2 multiplied by 4 over 3 is 6, and then you have that minus 2. Okay, and then obviously the next thing you need to do is you need to solve this new bracket. So you have 6 minus 2, and you end up with 1/3 divided by 4. Okay, next thing you want to do is you want to express 1/3 as an improper fraction. You'd have 7/3, and then you turn that division sign to a multiplication sign. Now something you need to note, when you have a whole number like 4 is actually 4/1. Every whole number is that whole number divided by 1. Okay, so 4/1. Okay, and when you invert 4/1, just like basically following the law of division, you'd have 1/4, and then when you multiply this out, you'd have that 7/3 multiplied by 1/4 is 7/12, and that is our answer. And that would bring us to the end of this lesson. Okay, it's been a very simple, just very simple basic principles. And yeah, bye for now.